The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my auto shop. I'd been under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Buick for the past hour, but my mind wasn't on the faulty alternator. It was on the text message I'd accidentally seen on my wife's phone that morning. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. Same place. Jay. My name isn't Jay. My name is Danny Sullivan, and I've been married to Lisa for 8 years. 8 years of thinking I knew the woman who shared my bed, my dreams, my bank account. The shop door chimed, and I looked up to see my wife walking in with her brother Jake trailing behind her. Jake Mitchell, the golden boy who'd never worked a day in his life, but somehow always had money for designer clothes and expensive cars. Lisa had kept her maiden name for professional reasons, she'd said. Now I wondered if it was for other reasons, too. Danny, we need to talk, Lisa said, her voice carrying that tone she used when she was about to ask for something I wouldn't want to give. I wiped my hands on my coveralls, buying time. About what? Jake stepped forward, his perfectly white teeth gleaming in what he probably thought was a charming smile. About the house, brother-in-law. Lisa and I have been talking, and we think it's time you refinanced. Interest rates are great right now. The house is fine, I said, keeping my voice level. Mortgage payments are current. But you could be saving hundreds every month, Jake pressed. I know a guy who can get you approved same day. All you need to do is sign some papers. I looked at Lisa. She was avoiding my eyes, fidgeting with her purse strap. This your idea or his? It's a good opportunity, Danny. Jake's just trying to help himself, more likely. I'd heard this song before. Jake would recommend his guy, who would turn out to be some shady broker who'd load the loan with fees that would somehow end up in Jake's pocket. It's how he'd been living for years, off other people's trust and his sister's influence. Not interested, I said. Jake's smile faltered. Come on, man. Don't be stubborn. This is family, looking out for family. Family. I let the word hang in the air. Right. Lisa finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? Danny, please. Just listen to what he's offering. I said no. I turned back to the Buick, hoping they'd take the hint and leave. Instead, Jake moved closer. You know what your problem is, Sullivan? You think small, always have. Lisa deserves better than this. He gestured around the shop with obvious disdain. I straightened up slowly, all 6 feet 2 inches of me. Jake was taller, but he'd never thrown a punch that wasn't in a gym with gloves and a referee. Better than what? Better than a grease monkey who can't see opportunity when it's handed to him on a silver platter. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because I heard Lisa's voice in them. How many times had she complained to her brother about our life? About me? Get out, I said quietly. Danny? Lisa started. Both of you, get out of my shop. Jake laughed, actually laughed. Your shop? Lisa told me you're 3 months behind on rent. The lie came so easily to him, so confidently, that for a second I almost believed it myself. But I knew my books. I knew exactly where every dollar went, and the rent was paid through next month. That's not true, I said. Isn't it? Jake pulled out his phone. Maybe I should call your landlord, confirm the details. The threat was clear. Jake knew people, had connections. He could make trouble for me whether I was behind on rent or not. One phone call from the right person, and suddenly I'd be scrambling to keep my business alive. Lisa was staring at the floor now, her face flushed. She knew Jake was lying, but she wasn't going to contradict him. That told me everything I needed to know about where her loyalty lay. Fine, I said. I'll look at your paperwork. Jake's grin returned full force. Now you're being smart. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow. They left together, Lisa's hand on her brother's arm like they were the married couple. I watched through the window as Jake opened the passenger door of his BMW for her, watched him lean in close to say something that made her laugh. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a beer and Jake's business card, which Lisa had left on the counter. On the back, in her handwriting, was a phone number I didn't recognize. I called it. "Hello?" A man's voice, smooth and confident. "Who is this?" I asked. "Who's this?" he countered. I hung up and stared at the card. Jake? Or someone else entirely? My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Same excuse she'd been using twice a week for the past month. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in 8 years of marriage. I followed my wife. Lisa left the house at her usual time, 8:30 a.m., claiming she had an early client at the fitness studio where she taught yoga. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my truck and drove the route to her studio. She wasn't there. Instead, I found her car parked outside the Riverside Hotel, the nicest place in our small town. The kind of place where rooms cost more per night than most people made in a week. I sat in my truck for 2 hours watching. At 10:47 a.m., Lisa came out of the hotel with a man I'd never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. They kissed goodbye in the parking lot, not the peck on the cheek of friends, but the deep, hungry kiss of lovers. The man got into a silver Mercedes with out-of-state plates. I memorized the license number. Lisa drove straight to the studio, probably to establish her alibi. I drove home and called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. By noon, I'd run the license plate through a buddy who worked at the DMV. The Mercedes belonged to Jonathan Hayes, 34, from Chicago. A quick internet search revealed he was a real estate developer who specialized in revitalizing small towns. He'd been in the local paper 2 weeks ago, talking about a project to convert our old downtown into upscale condos and boutique shops. The kind of project that would need local investors, local connections, local wives of local business owners who might be able to influence their husbands to refinance their properties. I was starting to understand Jake's sudden interest in my financial situation. That evening, Lisa came home with takeout from our favorite restaurant, acting like the devoted wife she'd been pretending to be for months. "How was your day?" she asked, setting containers of Chinese food on our kitchen table. "Productive," I said. "Learned a lot." She looked at me sharply. "About what?" "Real estate, development, the future of our little town." Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, you mean that article about the downtown project?" "I saw that too." "Sounds interesting." "Very interesting. I'm thinking about getting involved." "Involved how?" I opened a container of lo mein, taking my time. "Well, Jake's right about one thing. Maybe I have been thinking too small. Maybe it's time to leverage what we have, take some risks." Lisa sat down across from me, her food untouched. "What kind of risks?" "The house, the shop. We could borrow against everything, invest in something bigger." "Danny, that sounds dangerous." "Does it? Yesterday you were all for refinancing. What changed?" She was quiet for a long moment, picking at her sweet and sour chicken. "I just want to make sure we're being smart about it." "Smart." I nodded. "Like your brother Jake. He's always been the smart one in your family, hasn't he?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just an observation." We ate in silence after that, both of us pretending everything was normal while the lies hung between us like smoke. Later that night, after Lisa had gone to bed, I sat in my garage workshop and made a list. Not of what I was going to do, but of what I was going to lose. My wife, my marriage, probably half of everything I'd worked for. But maybe, if I played this right, I wouldn't lose everything. Maybe I could salvage something from the wreckage. I thought about Jonathan Hayes and his silver Mercedes. I thought about Jake and his schemes. I thought about Lisa, lying next to me every night while planning her exit strategy. They thought they were so clever, so much smarter than the small-town mechanic who couldn't see the big picture. They were about to find out how wrong they were. 3 days later, Jake showed up at my shop with a briefcase full of loan documents and that same condescending smile. "Ready to join the big leagues, Danny?" I pretended to study the papers, asking questions I already knew the answers to. The loan was exactly what I'd expected, a predatory mess of fees and clauses that would put me in debt up to my eyeballs while funneling money to Jake and his associates. "This seems complicated," I said. "Maybe I should have a lawyer look at it." Jake's smile tightened. "Lawyers just slow things down, cost money. This is a standard refinancing package. I've seen hundreds of them. Still, it's a big decision. Danny," Jake leaned forward, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Let me be straight with you. This offer won't be available forever. Interest rates are going up. Property values are about to shift. You wait too long, you'll miss the boat entirely." "What do you mean, property values are about to shift?" "Development, investment. This town is about to change, and you can either be part of it or get left behind." I set the papers down. "What kind of development?" Jake realized he'd said too much. "Just rumors. Nothing concrete. But you know something. I know opportunity when I see it." I picked up a pen, clicked it a few times. "You know what? You're right. I've been thinking too small." Jake's eyes lit up. "Now you're talking. But I want to think bigger than this." I tapped the loan documents. "This is just refinancing. What if I wanted to really invest? Buy more property? Get in on the ground floor of whatever's coming?" "That would take serious capital." "How serious?" Jake was practically salivating now. "Depends on what you want to buy, but we're talking hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. I might be able to swing that." "How?" I leaned back in my chair, letting him wait. "Insurance." "Insurance?" "I've got $1 million policy on the shop, another $500,000 on the house. Been paying premiums for years, never thought I'd need them." Jake's expression changed, became more calculating. That's a lot of coverage for a small business. My dad always said you can't be too careful. Of course, he also said you can't be too trusting." The warning was subtle, but Jake caught it. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Insurance is for emergencies," he finally said. "True. But emergencies happen. Fires, accidents, break-ins. This is a rough neighborhood." It wasn't, actually. Our little downtown was one of the safest areas in the county, but Jake didn't need to know that. "You're not thinking of doing anything risky, are you, Danny?" I laughed. "Me? I'm the most careful guy you'll ever meet. Ask anyone." Jake left with the unsigned loan papers, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. I'd planted a seed, and knowing Jake, he'd water it with his own greed. That evening, Lisa came home early for the first time in weeks. "Jake said you had an interesting conversation today," she said, hanging up her jacket. "Did he?" "He's worried about you." "Worried how?" Lisa sat down next to me on the couch, closer than she'd been in months. "He thinks you might be under more stress than you're letting on." "Financial stress. Jake's very perceptive. Danny, if there's something wrong, you can tell me. We're a team. A team. Right. Everything's fine, Lisa. Better than fine, actually." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm starting to see the bigger picture, understanding how things really work in this town." She was quiet, studying my face. "What things?" "Connections. Relationships. Who knows who? Who's sleeping with who?" Lisa went very still. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." I turned to look at her directly. "Small towns are funny places. Everybody thinks they're keeping secrets, but really, everybody knows everything. Danny. Like that real estate developer from Chicago, Jonathan Hayes, nice car, expensive suits. I bet he knows all sorts of interesting people." The color drained from Lisa's face. "I don't know who that is." "No." "Funny. I could have sworn I saw someone who looked just like you having coffee with him last week. You're mistaken. Maybe. I make a lot of mistakes lately, like trusting people I shouldn't trust. Lisa stood up abruptly. I'm going to take a shower. She left the room without another word, and I heard the bathroom door lock behind her. I sat on the couch, listening to the water run, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to walk into it. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. My shop's security alarm, shrieking through the phone like a wounded animal. I drove through empty streets, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When I turned the corner onto Main Street, I could see the orange glow 3 blocks away. My shop was on fire. The fire department was already there, along with 2 police cars and what seemed like half the town. I parked behind the ambulance and walked toward the flames, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. Danny! Chief Morrison grabbed my arm. Jesus, I'm sorry. We got here as fast as we could, but it was already too far gone. I stared at the burning building where I'd spent the last 12 years of my life. Anyone hurt? No, thank God. Building was empty. How did it start? Morrison exchanged a look with one of his officers. Too early to tell. Fire investigator will be here in the morning, but I already knew how it started, and I knew who started it. I spent the next 3 hours watching my livelihood turn to ash and twisted metal. Lisa showed up around 4 a.m., playing the role of the concerned wife perfectly. She held my hand and said all the right things while the cameras rolled for the local news. We'll get through this, she whispered. The insurance will cover everything. The insurance. Of course. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of Detective Ray Kowalski, a man I'd known since high school. Ray had been a linebacker then, built like a brick wall with a brain to match. 20 years later, he'd kept the build but sharpened the brain considerably. Arson, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Accelerant poured around the back entrance, ignited with a road flare. Professional job, but not too professional. Guy left the flare behind. Any prints? Wiped clean. But here's the interesting part. Ray leaned back in his chair. Your brother-in-law Jake was seen at Murphy's bar until 1:30 a.m. that night. Has about 6 witnesses. Solid alibi. Very solid. Almost like he made sure people would remember him being there. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Danny, I have to ask. You having any financial troubles? Marriage problems? Anything that might make someone think you'd want to burn down your own place? My marriage is fine, I lied, and the business was doing okay. Not great, but okay. $1 million insurance policy seems like a lot for a small auto shop. My dad was paranoid about being underinsured. I just kept up the payments. Ray studied me for a long moment. You know, if someone hired a torch to take out your place, thinking they were doing you a favor, that someone might be in for a nasty surprise. How's that? Insurance companies don't pay out on arson claims until they're satisfied the owner wasn't involved. Could take months, maybe years. Meanwhile, you're out of business, out of income, and still liable for all your debts. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I didn't know that. Most people don't. But someone who works in real estate development, someone who deals with insurance claims regularly, they'd know. Jonathan Hayes. He'd know exactly how insurance worked, exactly how long I'd be tied up in legal proceedings, long enough for him and Lisa to disappear with whatever money they could squeeze out of me first. There's something else, Ray said. We ran the serial number on that road flare. Came from a batch sold to Mitchell Construction 3 months ago. Mitchell Construction. Jake's company, the one he'd started with family money and run into the ground within 2 years. Circumstantial, I said. Very circumstantial. But interesting. I left the police station with my head spinning. They'd tried to frame me for burning down my own business, but they'd screwed up the insurance angle. Now I was broke, unemployed, and under suspicion for arson. But I was also angry. angrier than I'd ever been in my life. That night, I called my oldest friend, Mike Torres. We'd grown up together, served as each other's best man, trusted each other with secrets we'd never told our wives. Danny, man, I'm so sorry about the shop. If you need anything... Actually, I do need something. I need to know if you still have contacts at the phone company. Mike was quiet for a moment. What kind of contacts? The kind that can pull phone records. Danny, that's not legal without a warrant. I know, but I also know you've done it before. Another pause. What's this about? I told him everything. The affair, Jake's schemes, the fire, the insurance trap. When I finished, Mike was quiet for a long time. Jesus, he finally said. Lisa really did all that? She really did. And you want phone records to prove it? I want phone records to destroy them. Mike sighed. I'll see what I can do. But Danny, if this goes sideways, it won't. Trust me. 3 days later, Mike handed me a manila envelope in the parking lot of a diner outside town. Inside were 6 months of phone records for Lisa, Jake, and Jonathan Hayes. The story they told was even worse than I'd imagined. The affair had started 4 months ago, but the planning went back further. Jake had been in contact with Hayes for over a year, setting up the development deal and looking for local properties to acquire cheaply. Lisa wasn't just Hayes's lover. She was his inside source, feeding him information about local businesses, property values, and potential targets, including me. There were dozens of calls between the three of them in the weeks leading up to the fire. Text messages discussing my insurance policy, my financial situation, even my daily schedule. They'd planned everything, down to the timing of the arson. Jake would be at the bar, establishing his alibi, while some hired torch burned down my shop. Lisa would play the grieving wife, helping me through the tragedy, while Hayes bought up distressed properties for his development project. The only thing they hadn't planned on was Ray Kowalski's investigation, or the insurance company's reluctance to pay out on obvious arson. Now they were scrambling, and desperate people make mistakes. I was counting on it. The confrontation happened at Murphy's bar on a Friday night, exactly 1 week after the fire. I'd made sure word got around that I'd be there, drinking away my sorrows and probably saying things I shouldn't say. Jake showed up first with 2 of his buddies from the construction crew. Then came Lisa, playing the concerned wife. Finally, around 10 p.m., Mike Torres arrived with 3 of our mutual friends: Steve Kowalski, Ray's younger brother, Tom Bradley, and Jeff Morrison, the fire chief's nephew. The same friends who'd been avoiding my calls all week. Danny! Jake's voice boomed across the bar. There's my brother-in-law! How you holding up, buddy? I raised my beer bottle in a mock toast. Never better, Jake. Living the dream. He laughed and slapped me on the back, hard enough to make me stumble. That's the spirit. You gotta stay positive in times like these. Times like these? I repeated. Yeah, it's funny how times change, isn't it? Lisa moved closer, her hand on my arm. Danny, maybe you should slow down a little. Slow down? Why would I slow down? I've got all the time in the world now. No business to run, no customers to serve, just me and my loving family. The word family came out with enough venom to make Jake's friends shift uncomfortably. Look, man, Jake said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. I know you're hurting. But burning down your own shop? That's not the answer. The bar went quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to pause. What did you just say? I asked. Come on, Danny. We all know what happened. Business was failing, bills piling up. You saw an easy way out. I looked around the room, seeing the faces of people I'd known my whole life. Some looked sympathetic, others looked suspicious. All of them were waiting to see what I'd do. You think I burned down my own shop? I think you made a desperate decision, Jake said. And now you're looking for someone else to blame. That's when Mike stepped forward, and I knew the moment had come. Actually, Jake, Mike said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent bar, I think Danny's looking to blame the right person. Jake's confident smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? Mike pulled out his phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. It means we know about the phone calls. All of them. The blood drained from Jake's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do, I said, standing up slowly. You're talking about the calls between you, Lisa, and Jonathan Hayes. The ones where you planned to burn down my shop and frame me for insurance fraud? Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in a perfect performance of shocked innocence. Danny, that's crazy. You're drunk and you're not thinking clearly. Am I? I pulled out my own phone and opened the voice recording app. Because I've been thinking pretty clearly for the past week. Clear enough to record this entire conversation. Jake lunged for my phone, but Steve Kowalski stepped between us. Steve was bigger than his brother Ray, and a lot less patient. I wouldn't, Steve said quietly. Jake backed off, but his eyes were wild now. This is bullshit. You can't prove anything. Can I? I scrolled through the phone records Mike had given me. Jake Mitchell called Jonathan Hayes 17 times in the month before my shop burned down. Lisa called Hayes 43 times. And on the night of the fire, Lisa called Jake at 11:47 p.m., 20 minutes before she called me to wake me up and tell me about the alarm. The room was dead silent now. Even the bartender had stopped pretending to clean glasses. But here's my favorite part, I continued. The text message Jake sent to Hayes at 2:33 a.m., 16 minutes after the fire department arrived. Quote, "It's done. Package delivered as promised." End quote. Jake's face had gone from pale to gray. Those records are illegal. You can't use them. You're right. I can't use them in court. But I can sure as hell use them here in front of everyone we know to show what kind of people you really are. I turned to Lisa, who was crying now, real tears for the first time in months. Did you really think I was that stupid? Did you think I wouldn't figure out that my loving wife was feeding information to her boyfriend so he could destroy my life? Danny, please. Please what? Please forgive you for cheating on me? Please understand that you were just looking out for your own interests? Please pretend that you didn't help your brother burn down everything I worked for? Tom Bradley stepped forward, his face hard with anger. Lisa, is this true? Lisa looked around the room, seeing the faces of people who'd known her since childhood, people who'd trusted her, believed in her. I didn't know they were going to burn down the shop. I swear I didn't know. But you knew about the affair, Jeff Morrison said. You knew about the development deal. Lisa's voice broke. I just wanted something better. Something more than this. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Jake made one last desperate play. You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial. You're right again, I said, but I don't have to prove it. Because Jonathan Hayes already did. I pulled out another piece of paper, one I'd been saving for last. Turns out, Mr. Hayes is a careful businessman. Very careful. He keeps detailed records of all his transactions, including payments to local contractors for site preparation services. Jake's face went white. How did you get that? Hayes is under investigation by the Illinois State Police for fraud. They were very interested to learn about his activities in our little town, especially when I told them about the insurance scam. You went to the cops? I went to everyone, Jake. State police, FBI, insurance investigators. Turns out conspiracy to commit arson is a federal crime when it involves insurance fraud. The room erupted. People were shouting, asking questions, demanding answers. In the chaos, Jake tried to make a run for the door, but Steve Kowalski grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Where do you think you're going? Steve growled. This isn't over, Jake snarled at me. You think you're so smart, but you just destroyed your own wife, your own marriage. I looked at Lisa, who was sobbing into her hands while the women in the bar stared at her with disgust and disappointment. No, Jake, I said. You did that. You and your greed and your schemes. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Ray Kowalski looked around the bar, taking in the scene, then walked over to me. Danny, we need to talk. I figured. But first I need to place someone under arrest. He walked over to Jake, who was still being held against the wall by his brother. Jake Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, and destruction of property. As Ray read Jake his rights, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mike Torres was standing beside me, along with Steve, Tom, and Jeff. Hell of a thing, Mike said quietly. Yeah. You okay? I looked around the bar, at the faces of people I'd known my whole life. Some were angry, some were sad, but all of them were looking at me with something I hadn't seen in weeks: respect. I will be, I said. Lisa approached me as the police were leading Jake away. Her face was streaked with tears, her makeup ruined. Danny, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, Lisa. But sorry doesn't fix anything. What happens now? I thought about that for a moment. Now you figure out how to live with what you've done. And I figure out how to live without you. She nodded, understanding that it was over between us. The house? Keep it. I never want to see it again. Where will you go? I looked around the bar one more time, at the friends who'd stood by me when it mattered most. I'll figure something out. I always do. 6 months later, I was running a new auto shop on the other side of town, built with the insurance money that finally came through after Jake and Hayes were convicted. Lisa had moved to Chicago, trying to start over somewhere people didn't know her story. Jake got 5 years in federal prison. Hayes got 10. And me? I got my life back. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.